part 2 of our program. We're joined by a live audience on the webcast who are tweeting their questions, and thank you all out in the Twitter sphere and in the blogosphere for your comments and suggestions. We've been reading them closely, so keep them coming. And your questions, hold up your questions, and they'll be brought to the podium. We're not going to take questions for the next 30 minutes. Each of the following presenters is being given 10 minutes as a fire starter to start the afternoon fire and get us activated for the afternoon program. We thought it would be a good thing to start with fundamentals. We have with us from the UK, Graham Coakley, who is an advisor to many companies and international institutions who are working on smart city technologies, services, solutions, and runs a company as a partner called Urban DNA, formerly with Capgemini. I want you to think of Graham and then the 2 10-minute presentations that follow as really kind of a setup for what we're going to do with the 2 panels in the afternoon. So without any further ado, Graham Coakley.
Thanks, Gordon. I thought you were going to call me doctor. That would have been wrong. Professor would have been better. Neither would have been correct. I thought I'd talk to you about Brexit because that would be a far more interesting topic. I woke up this morning and it was embarrassing being British. I want you to know one thing. I'm Scottish. It makes a big difference. So you better start the clock. I have 7 messages to give you in 10 minutes. And each of those messages are important. So I tried to say you can't cover 7 things in 10 minutes. Let's take some of them away. And then I looked at them and I said all of them are important. So I've decided to cover 7 things in 10 minutes as important topics. And what I'd like to do is these are 7 things that I think we've learned from the wave of smart city activities to date. So let me start with that, but start with just very briefly in terms of context. Cities, like people, are very different. You look here at the space of cities, the density of cities, the population of cities around the world, and it looks different. Now, you can take 8 of them and stick them, and Singapore's not on that, but you can kind of pop Singapore in amongst, shall we say, Atlanta. And so these differences are really important for us to understand. But think of toothpaste and aspirins. What a strange thing that guy said. When you walk into a chemist, particularly if you're male, you just pick a packet of aspirins off the shelf and take 2, or take 3, or 1, or don't take them. The point is human beings respond to simple things in simple ways. And so we need to find the aspirins in the toothpaste of cities that deals with the fact that they're very, very different. So context matters, but cities are very, very similar. What have we seen the focus of smart cities to date? And cities are complicated and multifarious things. We've been really dealing with a lot of transport and mobility, and that's really good, and there's a long, long journey to go on that. We've been dealing with energy. Most importantly, there's a lot to do, but our focus has been on each of the pieces. The message is now we need to figure out how we deal with the total as a system. I'm involved in the European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities, and I've been pushing water uphill for the last 3 years. And it's tough. And then I saw this picture and I thought, yeah, that feels like where I'm at. The problem is a lot of the good ideas disappear into a gap. So I see there's some substantial things that need to happen for us to be successful on smart cities. Because that adoption gap between an idea and positive action in the field is very real. And if we do what we've done, we'll get what we got, which is not what we need. So we need to figure out how to deal with getting a lot of these very good ideas over that gap into success. And my view is the jury's still out. So, 7 things in 7 minutes. Thing number 1. females make the best city managers because, unlike males, they have the ability to focus on two things at the same time, which is the context within which you're making change and the specific that you're actually focusing on. And that is really, really important. That makes the difference between managing a city and managing a corporation. Because in managing a city, you always have to have the context of it in your mind and at the same time be myopically focused on making specific things. It's like acupuncture. And cities are complicated things. Just a picture of transport in amongst the system. Understanding that is the challenge. And it's the most important challenge that we must face. Now, there are lots of ballerina cities out there. Lots of the very good cities, quite a few of them are quite large, and we all know their names. And it's great that they're out doing great things. But more than 50% of people do not live in large, and certainly not the better large ballerina cities. Most people live in mid and small-sized cities. If we neglect mid and small-sized cities, we are not solving the problem. We are creating a different form of gap. So it's really important that we deal with that. Common solutions for shared challenges. Aspirins and toothpaste. So what is it that we can do to actually help the small and medium-sized cities? Fundamentally important. The role of standardization organizations in that is vast. I got an email from a very good friend the other day. It said, and I'm asking you this question now, does anybody know of a good smart cities strategy or plan? And my immediate response was no. And my thoughtful response was no. So I asked a whole bunch of friends that are involved in cities, and I said, can you show me a good plan? And they all said no. So my question to you is, do you know a good plan for a smart city? And I think the answer to that is possibly no as well. What we typically do is we create tomes of paper. They're defense mechanisms. They're crutches for not moving forward. What we need is a different approach. And I believe that visualization is an example of something which is intuitive. A picture and 1,000 words. So what is it that we can do that will actually speed up and make more agile how we move forward with cities? This is the vice mayor, or the ex-vice mayor of Barcelona. Barcelona is one of the ballerina cities, done wonderful things. And the vice mayor said, no more pilots. We are creating Frankenstein. It's got arms and legs and heads and all the pieces, but it just doesn't look very pretty. Again, that reinforces the need to look at it systemically and figure out how we aren't dealing with individual silo solutions to cities. And here I want to focus on the gap again. For the last 5-10 years, we've had a conversation which has been the supply to demand to supply. That conversation goes on for a while, and then somebody says, I'm buying or I'm selling, and then the conversation kind of gets a bit tight and difficult. What we forgot to do is to bring money into the equation, and business models was mentioned earlier on. So what can we do to actually engage investors early? We engage them too late, at the point where it all looks very complicated and technical, and financial people just get a little scared at that point. So what can we do to actually make it easier to engage the financial community to bring in the intelligence that helps us build business models that work early? And by the way, the most important piece is building society into that equation, but it'd be nice if we could get the investors in first, then we can actually get some things going and at the same time start focusing on society. So that gap in the market is a really, really important place for us to go and play, which is reinforcing collaboration, which is reinforcing common solutions for shared challenges, and therefore the role of standards, amongst other things. Now, I don't want to focus on all the words on that, but here's an example. Let's find, there are 4 or 5 things that you can do in a city, which is simple to do, it's a quick win. We should find the reason why cities are not doing these 4 or 5 things. And they should be asked, why are you not doing some of these 4 or 5 things? The lamppost, the example in here. There's a bold goal now to put 10 million smart lampposts around European cities. Bold goals attach themselves to investors, attach themselves to commissioners. They take an interest in these sorts of things. So let's find some quick wins that we can really move forward with. I want to move now to data. We've talked about open data as the answer. You know, how big is my open data store? I really don't care, to be quite frank. Open data is a tiny, tiny percentage. It's growing fast, and it's important, but it's a tiny percentage of what a city needs to deal with when it comes to data. So one of the learnings that I have seen is the inability to look holistically at the various different forms of data, the behaviors of the data, the characteristics of the data, and how they're changing. And the issue on data isn't just one of actually understanding where it is and have I got it and am I governing it right. The big challenge now that cities face is in managing valuation of data and also, by the way, managing the commercialization of that to make sure that they are controlling the value and the commercialization of that instead of just industry. Alas, industry can afford very expensive data scientists. Cities can't. So how can we build capacity in cities? Again, the role of guidance to help in that process. So I've rattled quickly through 7 key messages. We shouldn't apologize for the complexity. We should manage it. For small and medium-sized cities, we should demand aggregate. Leadership is absolutely key. No more pilots. Let's get on with doing things. Close the gap in the market, understand the gap in the market and close it, and most particularly involve financiers in the process. And then the last 2, the most important of which for me is around data. Last slide very briefly then is here's the Europeans and the European response to it. And I pick out 3 initiatives in something called the European Innovation Partnership that's trying to actually tackle this. One is at a national level, which is to bring 6 nations together that are progressive and doing rather well. And the next speaker will talk about Spain, so listen in hard to that. The second is to deal with the simplicity of a lamppost. The reason why I shouldn't be doing things. Simple things that we should just get on with. And the middle bit is an interesting one in terms of how you actually manage the data, the platform, how you bring all of those things together. The message here is the European Commission is trying to cause Europe to figure out how they deal with national level, the market, specifics, and the cross-cutting aspect of urban data, and also to share with the rest of the world. Again, the role of standardization organizations in that is absolutely key. Thanks very much. I've rattled through quite swiftly those various different points. I hope they provoked some imagination.
So now you can tell people that when the 7 commandments came down from the mountain, you were witness to those 7 commandments being revealed. We will put them in stone. Next, we have, as you heard from Graham, a representative of the Spanish government. Tania Marcos Paramillo flew here from Madrid, and she's ready to tell you on behalf of the program that she manages on Smart Cities Standards Strategy at the Ministry of Industry, Energy, and Tourism of the Spanish government, why Spain stands out in Europe, why the Spanish have pursued a strategy which is in sync with the things that we've talked about. So, Tania, please join us on stage.
Thank you, Gordon. Well, I'm not as good a communicator as Graham, so I have less messages and more slides, so I will try to be as brief as possible. I really thank the opportunity to share with all of you all the things that are being done in Spain. I wanted to start with this night map of Spain with the consumption of energy so that you could see that we have inland territories and a big amount of rural territories, but I think it's worth it to have a look to the sky, and because this is something that has not changed since the beginning of the concept of civilization and the cities and the citizenship. We are talking about providing services to the citizens, and that's something that in Spain we try to keep in mind when developing the strategy for smart cities. And well, if we think about technology is present everywhere, and obviously it's something that is necessary because it is the tool of 21st century. But we have to think on how things have come to present and learn from past experience. We have heard the figures of United Nations on population in cities, and the challenges that will bring to our cities in terms of provision of services. However, cities need to know themselves and look for their specificity. For example, in Spain we have a high expectancy of living, and that means that on the contrary of the main general message, some cities are getting smaller in population instead of becoming bigger. And that's a challenge for those local governments that need to provide services to the population. So we can't think about a magical key on the recipe for a smart city that is general for all over the world. We have to look for our specificity with our needs for our own society, because each region also has their own needs. We needed to get all this experience together, and we have invested in the last years in many different areas, and happily we have now solved many of the general problems addressed to sustainability. We had this big investment in ICTs, and thanks to that we also have now real figures and not pilots, but real experiences, as told before. If we talk about data, let's say that Spain is well known about sports, obviously football, tennis, but we have invested in ICTs within the universities, with hubs, with startups, with the industry that is world-class industry, and the emerging activities as well. And we have provided this digital ecosystem, and let's say something that there are over 20 million connections of fiber optic deployed in Spain. So the most important thing is that we have a national plan for smart cities coming from the Ministry of Industry, from the Secretary of State of Telecommunications. It's aligned with the digital agenda in Spain. And then it's focused on the impact of public services on ICTs and on transforming and modernizing the economy of the Spanish society. So all this will give us the perfect framework to face these three objectives: on boosting the industrial sector, on promoting the digital transformation of local governments, and pushing the reutilization of all the solutions, but also the data, pushing the use of standards and standardized solutions, and the interoperability. We are talking about real investment. We put the money, the ministry put a lot of effort in supporting, not only with words, but also economically, the effort of the cities. So what was requested first was a clear plan, obviously, and then the government will put those funds for the implementation of all these activities. Then we have these calls specifically for smart cities and for smart islands, with nearly now it's 188 million of euros. We supported the studies. We created an advisory council joining all the ministries representing the local governments, the industry, and all the different agents in this activity. And we also have the support from the government on standardization. And we, through the national standards body, that is AENOR, we have deployed several national standards that are being used at national level. So what we have is plan structure in several pillars, and we try to finally create this whole system to have all the cities ahead towards the way of becoming smart cities in Spain, and also those that are in the tourism sector to become smart destinations as well. So what we have is to promote a cooperation between authorities and businesses, the public and private collaboration. We have to develop also these new business models. We think on the need to reuse all the data, the open data. That's one of the key elements. And obviously, we have to talk about this technological assessment and monitoring of all the initiatives of the cities to get the best of each of one. We have this national network that shares all the information at national level. We have a technical committee on standardization with more than 700 experts coming from all the sites. With this big support, we try to standardize the public service networks from the point of view of metrics, of indicators. We are facing the public services 4.0 as well. And we publish 20 standards. The most important ones are on open data. Not everything is open data, so we need to create this framework. And on the platform for interoperability, where you can link the metrics, the smart building, smart ports, airports, and verticals such as mobility. We focus on smart destination and smart rural territories. And we have taken this. This is one of the figures on the draft recommendation that we are promoting at ITU based on the national standard. We really appreciate the effort of all the agents at national level to promote all this at international level as well. And we think that all the standards body have many to do there. We just want to say that we have this innovative system that can be easily replicated in all the countries, and we encourage governments and the public administrations to take the lead in their countries and to use all the tools that are already available, not to reinvent the wheel, and take advantage of what is already being done, and to transform their cities in smart cities for the benefit of all the society. Thank you very much.
for our third conversation starter, fire starter. Many of us know Nicholas Yu from his days at UN Habitat headquarters in Nairobi. When he took his young retirement option, he decided to continue working, trained as an architect, with cities, with the real world problems that cities face, who are trying to redesign their future while redesigning the present at the same time. And in his capacity as director of the Guangzhou Institute of Urban Innovation, and in his various other roles, chairing various commissions and bodies that are looking at this urban innovation challenge, we thought it would be good before we move into the last two panels of the day that we get a perspective from somebody who's working in the trenches with cities, with city mayors and other city leaders, and hear about a few of those cities and what lessons have been learned. Nicholas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gordon, and it's always the same syndrome when you're the last speaker in a row of speakers. Everything you want to say has already been said, so I've decided to focus my presentation on hip-hop. No, I'm just joking. But Gordon will tell you the story about hip-hop later. Yes, I run something called the Guangzhou Institute for Urban Innovation, and its purpose in life is to draw lessons learned from urban innovations that are documented from around the world. We use as an incentive the Guangzhou Award for Urban Innovation. In the last two cycles, 2012, 2014, we've had some 400 submissions. This year we're already having 400 submissions, and that's 2 months before the deadline. So what I'm going to do here today is just to choose a few examples of smart city initiatives that really were judged to be outstanding in terms of lessons that can be learned by an independent technical appraisal system and an independent jury. So first of all, the basic question, what is a smart city? Is it about big data? Is it about technology? Is it about new business models? Is it about new forms of partnerships and governance? Well, let's take a look at a few examples. One of the big data examples that really struck the fancy of the jury back in 2014 was the case of Rio. And everybody's heard of the command center of Rio, but I don't think everybody knows what the origin of the story was. And the origin of the story was that we had this newly elected mayor who came into office, and shortly after he came into office, there was a flood. There was a lot of rain that hit Rio de Janeiro, and as we know, all the poor people live on the slopes of Rio de Janeiro. So that cloudburst resulted in deaths, in injuries, in loss of property. And he made it his political ambition to make sure that there would be no deaths the next time the rains hit Rio. And he managed to do that. But that was the single target. There was no other KPI. When he decided to use a big data approach, he said there's only one performance indicator. By this time next year, nobody dies from the rains. All right? And that forced different departments to work together, that forced departments to share data. They even discovered data that everybody had forgotten about. There was this very remote department working in a corner of some administration office in Rio de Janeiro that actually was mapping the subsoils and monitoring what was happening with the subsoils. So when they overlaid the subsoil map with the rainfall map, with meteorological data, all of a sudden they found out that they had a tool that could predict waterlogging and where the next landslide would occur. Now, once they did that, they were able to find that the methodologies they used, the approaches they used, everything else that they needed to prevent deaths from flooding could be applied to many other things. And the two biggest areas of impact were not on mobility or other things, they were on the prevention of dengue fever and malaria. So direct impact on health and well-being of people. Bristol was another city that caught the attention of the jury. Why? Because Bristol, in adopting its smart city strategy and its technologies, decided to engage its citizenry in deciding which technologies they were going to use. And that meant that the mayor of Bristol, famous Mayor Ferguson with his red pants, red trousers, always went and took the effort, the time, the money, the resources to educate people, to educate the population so that they could help in making the decision on which technologies they were going to use going forward. New business models. The business model of Hangzhou bicycle program really also struck the fancy of the jury. Not only because it's the biggest system that's existing today, some 400,000 users, I think, was because it's money-making. And the city only invested the startup capital, and now it's running on its own, and it's making a profit. And how is it making a profit? Is that by carefully analyzing the last mile, they decided to, they found out that they could merge last mile together with commerce and with e-commerce. So basically, not only do you have a smart bicycle system that's communicating with the bus system, communicating with the tram system, communicating with the metro system, you're also communicating with customer services, you're communicating with smart 7-Eleven type stores that people can already text in before what they need, if they need a top-up card for their phone, or if they need a soft drink, or they need to pick up some pharmaceuticals, etc. It's all part of that system. New partnerships, definitely, I think. New partnerships, everybody talks about PPP and new forms of partnerships, but I think there's one dimension that we tend to forget, and at least it's been my experience in working with PPPs and governance systems, that in order for effective public partnerships to work, you need effective public-public partnerships, and you need also effective private-private partnerships, right? And I was fortunate enough to work with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development on an urban infrastructure initiative, where we got several companies to help one city at a time in their strategic planning, very much upstream. We're talking about at least 2 or 3 steps away from contracts and procurement, but basically to help a city identify possible pitfalls going forward. If they're thinking of a metro system, or they're thinking about a logistics system, they're thinking about upgrading whatever infrastructure they're thinking of upgrading, is how to get companies to come in and let that city benefit from company expertise, company experience. One of the things we learned was that cities don't know what they don't know. They can come to conferences like that, like this one, but it doesn't mean that the person who's sitting here from City X is bringing that knowledge back into the system. So we have to find ways where that knowledge is spread around. Now, in the case of Guangzhou, what was really interesting was that we were dealing with not only a local government that was operating in the traditional silo system, we also had utilities that were operating as silos. Not surprising. You have a utility for gas, you have a utility for water, you have a utility for electricity. But the ambition, the vision of the city and its leadership was that Guangzhou wants to go low carbon. And how are you going to go low carbon, right, if your utilities are not working together, not collaborating together, and if your different departments that are sort of overseeing those utilities are also not communicating? So what the jury found that was really interesting in the case of Guangzhou was that they decided to call upon the help of a financial institution, a local bank. And of course, the local banks have to keep the data of their clients relatively discreet, right? You're not going to go and broadcast how much money Mr. X or Company A has in their bank account. So basically, the trust was built by the bank. The whole initiative was led by a vision by the political leadership of the city, yes, but basically the bank was able to bring together data from the 3 utilities, write algorithms that would give each customer every month a very clear account of how much carbon they were emitting and how much carbon they were saving through their efforts over time. So I think the brilliance of this initiative was that it basically married the individual effort with benefit to the individual. You actually see the impact on your monthly bill, and you also see what you're doing for the general good. So what are some of the lessons that we've been able to learn from these and many, many other cases? All in all, we have over 60 or 70 cases that are smart city approaches. The first one is, I think we have to put people first. I think in all the cases that I showed you today, the primary driving force was that this is about quality of life. This is about improving quality of life, be it saving lives, or be it in making people enjoy better quality air, quality water, or whatever. Another very important takeaway, make government service, public service, again, an employment of choice. I think this is very important. One of the biggest benefits we can get from smart city approaches is that when these approaches are successful, it can make people working in the public service proud of what they're doing because of the impact that they're making, the difference they're making on people's lives. We have to push for the highest quality standards. Smart cities cannot be run with contracts and procurement systems where we're looking for the lowest bidder. Right? It's shooting for the moon, and like one of the famous astronauts said, why he was so stressed out. He said, I'm sitting on $1 billion of rocket, each component of which was made by the lowest bidder. Well, I don't think we can go that path with smart cities. We need to engage in continuous improvement and learning. A smart city approach is a learning approach. We need to share information, of course, across departments, but also between public, private, and civil society actors. We need to use data strategically. I think this is the most important takeaway. It's not a matter of amassing more data or crunching more data. It's how to use data strategically. And last but not least, we have to engage people, and by engaging people, we discover that leadership is at all levels. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I didn't put you to sleep.